They called me old and helpless, as if those two words could shrink a lifetime of strength and wisdom into nothing more than a worn-out relic. At 70, I have become invisible in my own family's eyes, a shadow slipping quietly past conversations where my opinions are ignored and my presence barely acknowledged. I watch as decisions are made without me. Voices rise and fall in rooms I am meant to occupy, but am treated as if I only decorate the background, a silent observer to a life I once thought would grow richer with age. The dinners feel colder now, conversations sharper and more pointed, leaving me with a strange mix of loneliness and simmering frustration. My son, once my little boy who clung to my hand, now barely looks at me when I speak, brushing off my advice with a tired smile or a dismissive nod. My daughter glances my way only when she needs something, and even then, her eyes are impatient, filled with the unspoken assumption that I am a burden to be managed rather than a person to be valued. At the grocery store, neighbors whisper behind their hands or avoid eye contact altogether, as if my age is a contagious disease or a reminder of their own inevitable decline. The world moves faster than I can keep up, or so they say, yet I see clearly the richness of life they fail to notice. The patience I've cultivated, the lessons learned in silence, the strength forged in the quiet moments that no one applauds. But these small dismissals, being talked over at family meetings, being left out of plans, having my concerns brushed aside, pile up like stones in my chest until breathing feels heavy. I find myself retreating to my room, a refuge from the constant reminders that I am not needed, not wanted, not even truly seen. The walls around me grow taller with each slight, echoing with the laughter and chatter that no longer includes my voice. Yet beneath the surface of this quiet dismissal, a fierce ember burns, a refusal to be defined by the tired judgments of others. I remember who I was before age softened my edges and how much I still have to offer if only someone would listen. The irony is that the very people who have cast me aside are the ones who will soon need me most, though they cannot yet see it. I am not helpless. I am not finished. The years behind me hold stories of resilience, love, and hard-won wisdom, even if they are now overshadowed by the careless words of those who fail to understand. Every glance that overlooks me, every voice that ignores me, becomes fuel for the quiet storm gathering inside. I sit at the edge of the family table, a silent witness to their world, waiting for the moment when the scales will tip, and they will learn just how strong the so-called old and helpless can be. In this house where I am dismissed, I am quietly preparing to rewrite the story, one where respect is earned not by youth or noise, but by the steady, unyielding power of a heart that refuses to be broken. They see me as old and helpless, a fading presence who can barely keep up with the pace of their lives, but beneath that quiet exterior lies a reservoir of strength and resilience they refuse to acknowledge. While they dismiss my opinions and overlook my efforts, I am the silent engine that keeps this family running, managing the household finances with precision, stretching every dollar until it sings, balancing bills and unexpected expenses like a skilled tightrope walker. The creaky walls of this old house are held together by the hands they barely notice, the ones that fix leaking faucets, patch-torn screens, and keep the garden blooming through seasons of neglect. I have learned to move in the background, like a shadow that supports the whole without ever seeking praise or recognition. When the electricity flickers or the furnace sputters to life, it is my calm voice and steady hands that find solutions, while they rush to blame fate or the wear of time. I navigate the tangled web of insurance claims, medical appointments, and home repairs with a quiet determination, mastering a language of paperwork and phone calls that intimidates even the youngest among them. My family may not see the countless hours I spend negotiating discounts, coordinating contractors, or preparing meals that nourish and comfort. But I feel their absence in the meals skipped, or the windows left ajar in a cold breeze. Their assumption that I am fragile, incapable, and dispensable could not be further from the truth. I have weathered storms that never made the headlines. The loneliness of nights spent worrying over their futures, the endless cycles of fixing what is broken, visible or invisible. The lines etched on my face tell stories not only of age, but of battles fought in silence and victories won without fanfare. They fail to notice the resilience that has been my constant companion, the way I rise each morning despite aches and weariness, driven by a fierce love and unwavering sense of responsibility. I have kept this family together through hardships they are too young or too distracted to understand, holding fast when everything else seemed to unravel. Their ignorance cuts deeper than any words, but it also steels my resolve. I am more than the sum of their dismissals. I am the steady hand behind the scenes, the quiet force that turns chaos into order. When the car breaks down or the bills pile up, they come to me without hesitation, though they will not admit it aloud. It is a delicate dance, balancing the roles I am forced to play: the overlooked elder, the unacknowledged caretaker, and the silent backbone of this family. I do not seek their approval or applause. My strength comes from within, from a lifetime of facing challenges head-on and never letting them define me. The world may have labeled me as old and helpless, but I know the truth. I am the keeper of this home's heart, the guardian of its soul, and the unwavering rock that, whether seen or unseen, holds everything together. And when the time comes, they will learn that the most formidable strength often wears the quietest face. The breaking point arrived quietly, like a sudden crack splitting the calm surface of a still pond, shattering years of careful restraint and igniting a fire I had long kept smouldering beneath the ashes of polite smiles and patient silence. It was during a family dinner, one of those gatherings that were supposed to celebrate togetherness, but instead laid bare the fractures that had grown too wide to ignore. I tried to share a simple concern about my health, a nagging pain that had been worsening, hoping for a moment of care or at least acknowledgement. Instead, my words were met with dismissive laughter and thinly veiled eye rolls as my son brushed off my worries as old lady nonsense, and my daughter whispered to her husband about overreacting again. The table fell into a hum of casual conversation, but for me, the world tilted sharply, and the weight of invisibility crashed down like a tidal wave. I sat there, surrounded by people I loved, but who seemed determined to overlook my existence, as if my pain and presence were inconvenient obstacles to their own lives. The sting of rejection was not new, but this time it pierced deeper, cutting through the layers of tolerance I had painstakingly built over the years. I felt a fierce heat rising in my chest, a mixture of hurt, anger, and an unexpected surge of clarity. How long had I been shrinking myself to fit into their limited expectations? How many times had I swallowed my truth, silenced my needs, and accepted being sidelined as inevitable? That night, beneath the polite facade and measured tones, a quiet revolution took root. The pain I had borne alone became a catalyst, awakening a resolve that refused to be ignored any longer. I realized that if I did not reclaim control of my own life, no one else would. The humiliation of being dismissed so casually was a bitter pill, but it was also a stark mirror reflecting the urgent need for change. I remembered all the times I had quietly kept the household running, managed crises without recognition, and made sacrifices that no one acknowledged. Those moments of invisible strength suddenly felt like armor, not weakness, and I was done hiding behind it. The decision was not a dramatic outburst, but a steady, determined turning inward, gathering the courage to stand tall in the face of indifference. I vowed to no longer let their judgments define my worth or limit my voice. That night, as the family laughter echoed hollowly around me, I made a silent promise to myself. I would become the force they could not ignore, the presence they would come to depend on, and the woman who would reclaim her dignity and power. The journey ahead would not be easy, but I was ready to fight, not with anger or confrontation, but with quiet strength, unyielding patience, and the fierce conviction that comes from knowing your own worth. The breaking point was not an end, but a beginning, the moment when the old and helpless woman decided she was far from powerless, and that from now on, she would write her own story. The first small act of defiance came quietly, almost unnoticed, like a single seedling pushing its way through cracked concrete, stubborn and resilient, determined to claim space in a world that seemed designed to keep me invisible. It began with fixing the leaky faucet in the kitchen, a task my son had promised to handle weeks ago, but never did, leaving a slow drip to echo in the silence like a persistent reminder of my supposed helplessness. I fetched the wrench from the toolbox, the cold metal unfamiliar, but soon warming under my grip as I tightened the stubborn valve, watching the water finally flow steady and true. It was a small victory, but one that sent ripples through the household far greater than anyone realized. I began making decisions without waiting for permission, whether it was scheduling the doctor's appointments, organizing the grocery deliveries, or setting the thermostat to a comfortable temperature without consulting anyone. These seemingly minor acts unsettled the established order, a quiet challenge to the dismissive attitudes that had long relegated me to the background. When the furnace faltered on a bitter winter's night, and my family scrambled in panic, it was I who calmed the chaos, calling the repairman, arranging alternative heating, and assuring everyone that everything would be all right. They looked at me with surprise, as if the very idea that I could handle a crisis was novel, but I said nothing, letting my actions speak louder than their doubts. In family meetings, I began to voice opinions with a steadier tone, sharing insights drawn from years of experience, only to be met with polite nods that barely hid their disbelief. Still, I persisted, refusing to shrink back into the silence that once protected me, but now felt like a cage. My daughter glanced my way with a flicker of uncertainty when I took charge of the holiday plans, and my son, usually quick to dismiss, paused momentarily when I resolved a financial mix-up with calm efficiency. They underestimated the significance of these moments, seeing only isolated incidents rather than the quiet revolution brewing beneath the surface. But for me, each act was a brick laid in the foundation of my renewed independence, a reclaiming of agency that no longer asked for permission or apology. The house itself seemed to respond to my touch. Walls felt sturdier, rooms warmer, and the once overlooked garden outside began to flourish under my care, each bloom a testament to resilience. I found strength in the rhythm of daily tasks, in the deliberate choices that marked my presence and power. The quiet defiance was not loud or confrontational, but steady and unyielding, a slow unwrapping of the layers of doubt and dismissal that had been wrapped around me for too long. In this reclamation, I discovered a profound truth, that strength often wears the guise of patience, and courage whispers rather than shouts. My family may still see me as old and helpless, but I know the truth in my bones. I am the heartbeat that keeps this home alive, the steady hand that guides it through storms, and the quiet force that refuses to be ignored. For years, I had hidden beneath the surface, quietly gathering strength and knowledge, while my family remained blissfully unaware of the storm that was slowly building within me. A secret plan, fueled by the countless moments of dismissal and disrespect that had chipped away at my patience and ignited a fierce determination to reclaim my life on my own terms. I spent late nights poring over legal documents and financial statements, learning about my rights and the protections afforded to me as a homeowner. As a person with years of experience and contributions that far exceeded the recognition I had been given. The words on those pages were like keys, unlocking possibilities I had never dared to imagine, whispering promises of independence and respect that could no longer be denied. I met quietly with an old friend from the community, someone who saw me not as frail or incapable, but as a force to be reckoned with, and together we mapped out the steps I would take to secure my future. I arranged to have important papers updated and secured, financial accounts reviewed and reorganized, all without arousing suspicion or prompting questions. To everyone else, I was the same quiet woman who smiled politely and stayed in the background. But beneath that calm exterior, a meticulous plan was taking shape. A plan to shift the balance of power and demand the respect I deserved. The tension of this hidden effort pressed on me like a weight, both exhilarating and terrifying, knowing that once set in motion, there would be no turning back. I observed my family with new eyes, noting their careless assumptions and blind confidence that I would remain passive and dependent forever. They went about their lives, unaware that I was quietly reclaiming control, preparing to surprise them with a strength they had never expected. The juxtaposition between their ignorance and my resolve was stark, like a calm sea hiding the churn of a rising tide ready to crash upon the shore. I imagined their faces when the truth finally emerged. Shock, disbelief, maybe even anger. But I also imagined the respect that would come with undeniable proof that I was no longer to be overlooked. This plan was not born of spite, but of necessity and love. For myself and for the dignity that every person deserves. I was ready to stand tall and say that I mattered, that my years of hard work and silent sacrifice had not been wasted. The secret meetings, the late-night research, the careful planning. All these small acts of rebellion were my way of planting a flag in the ground, marking the beginning of a new chapter where I would no longer be dismissed as old and helpless. I felt a quiet thrill as I imagined the path ahead, uncertain yet promising, and I knew that no matter the obstacles, I would walk it with my head held high. The family might still think me powerless, but soon they would learn that the strongest storms come wrapped in the quietest moments, and that the woman they called old and helpless was the one who would change everything. The first victory came quietly, without fanfare or announcement, but its impact was as profound as the steady ripple caused by a single stone tossed into a still pond, spreading far beyond what anyone expected and forever altering the currents beneath the surface. It happened on a cold evening when my son, overwhelmed and distracted by work and family obligations, forgot to refill the oxygen tank for my husband, whose breathing was fragile and reliant on the steady flow of that small but vital machine. Panic set in quickly when the alarm sounded, but before anyone could scramble, I was there, calm, decisive, and unshaken by the urgency that paralyzed others. I knew exactly what to do, how to switch tanks safely, and reassure my husband with a quiet voice that steadied his trembling heart. The crisis passed without disaster, thanks to my swift actions, but the unspoken acknowledgement that followed was palpable, a reluctant recognition that I was not the helpless old woman they believed I was. My daughter later admitted in a hushed tone that she had feared the worst. But I saved him, and for the first time in years, her eyes held something new, respect mixed with surprise. Yet, this win did not come without a price. The undercurrent of resentment surfaced subtly in their interactions afterward, like a shadow trailing close behind the reluctant respect. My son, usually so quick to dismiss, grew quieter, but cast occasional glances that seemed to say, "Why do you have to remind us you are capable?" My daughter, though kinder in her words, carried a tension that suggested my actions unsettled the fragile balance they preferred to maintain. The family gatherings felt charged with a new energy, a mix of admiration and unspoken challenge, as if my quiet victory had shifted the ground beneath us, and none of us quite knew how to navigate the change. For me, this small success was a beacon, a proof that my strength was real and needed, a validation of the years of patience, skill, and love that had been invisible until now. It was as if I had stepped out of a long shadow and into a light that illuminated not just what I had done, but what I was capable of becoming. I felt a surge of confidence that mingled with the cautious hope that this would be the first of many moments where I would reclaim my place in the family, not as an afterthought, but as an essential pillar. Still, I understood the delicate dance ahead, how to assert my power without fracturing the fragile relationships, how to push boundaries without provoking walls. The first win was both a triumph and a test, a moment that revealed not only my strength, but the complex emotions swirling beneath the surface of those around me. In that quiet evening act, I had planted a seed of change, and though the soil was rocky and uncertain, I was ready to nurture it with the steady hands and unwavering heart that had carried me this far. The family might resist, but I was no longer willing to be invisible. The power shift began subtly, like the slow turning of a tide that no one saw coming until the shoreline was unmistakably changed beneath their feet. And I found myself stepping naturally into roles I had long been denied, becoming the quiet backbone that held the family together, even as they clung to old notions of who I was and what I could do. I took charge of managing the bills with a meticulous eye, reviewing every statement, negotiating with service providers, and ensuring nothing slipped through the cracks. While my family, distracted and busy with their own lives, gradually handed over these tasks without question, their trust in my competence growing even as their reluctance to admit it lingered like a shadow. Scheduling appointments, coordinating household repairs, organizing family events. These responsibilities piled onto my shoulders like stones, yet I bore them with a quiet dignity born from years of invisible labor, the kind that no one praises, but without which everything falls apart. I noticed the subtle glances exchanged when I calmly resolved issues they had let fester, the whispered acknowledgements when I smoothed over conflicts or anticipated needs before they were voiced. Yet their words still hung back, cautious and often tinged with surprise that I could do more than simply get by. The kitchen table conversations shifted as I brought forward suggestions and decisions with a calm authority that made even the most stubborn relatives pause and listen, though the echoes of their past dismissals sometimes surfaced in hesitant, grudging comments or attempts to reassert control. I watched as the balance of power, long tilted away from me, began to right itself in small but undeniable ways, with family members increasingly turning to me not just out of necessity, but out of recognition that I was the steady force they could rely on. It was a strange reversal of roles, where the woman they once called old and helpless had become the linchpin of their daily lives, the silent architect behind their comfort and stability. Yet this shift was not without its tensions. Some resisted the change with subtle undermining or veiled criticisms, uncomfortable with the idea that I no longer fit the mold they had cast for me. I met these moments with patience and grace, understanding that transformation is often met with resistance, especially when it challenges long-held beliefs. In this new role, I discovered a renewed sense of purpose and power, the fulfillment that comes from being truly seen for who you are and what you bring to the table. The house felt different now, less like a place where I was tolerated and more like a home I helped shape and sustain. Each day, as I balanced calendars, handled emergencies, and made decisions with quiet confidence, I reclaimed not only my place in the family, but also my sense of self-worth. The tide had indeed turned, and with it, a chapter of invisibility closed to make way for the undeniable truth. I was indispensable. Not because I asked for it, but because I earned it with unwavering strength and a heart that refused to be diminished. Resistance came like a cold wind, cutting through the fragile warmth I had begun to build, sharp and unexpected, reminding me that change, especially one that challenges old beliefs, never arrives without struggle and sacrifice. As I stepped further into my role as the family's quiet backbone, managing tasks, making decisions, and gently steering the household with steady hands, some family members bristled with discomfort and resentment, their dismissive smiles thin masks barely hiding the sting of jealousy and fear. Whispers started to circulate, quiet gossip in hushed corners, comments that questioned my motives or undermined my efforts, painting me as meddlesome or overstepping boundaries that some still believed I had no right to cross. I caught the fleeting glances of disapproval when I offered advice or took charge of situations, and sometimes I faced passive-aggressive remarks, thinly veiled as jokes, designed to chip away at my growing confidence. There were moments when the hostility turned more direct. Sharp words tossed across the room, accusations of being controlling or difficult, and cold silences that sliced through the warmth I had worked so hard to cultivate. Yet, through every whisper, every cold glance, and every pointed remark, I remained steadfast, holding on to the quiet strength that had carried me through decades of dismissal and neglect. I learned to weather these storms with patience, knowing that the roots of their resistance were tangled in their own fears and insecurities, not in any true reflection of my worth or intentions. Each confrontation became a test of my resolve, a challenge to remain grounded in the truth of who I was and what I had earned. I practiced the art of calm endurance, responding not with anger or retaliation, but with grace and unwavering dignity, refusing to let their doubts diminish the light I had begun to shine. I found solace in small victories, moments when my actions spoke louder than their words, when a crisis was averted through my intervention, or when a reluctant family member silently acknowledged my role with a nod or a brief smile. The resistance, while painful, only deepened my understanding of the delicate dance that comes with changing long-established dynamics. I realized that healing is rarely swift or easy, and that those clinging to old roles often lash out when confronted with the unfamiliar. This backlash was not a sign of failure, but a signal that the power I wielded was real and unsettling to those unprepared to share it. It was in this crucible of challenge that my true strength was forged, tempered by patience, resilience, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing my worth even when others refuse to see it. I became a steadfast presence, a living testament to the idea that strength need not shout to be undeniable, that change born from love and dignity endures beyond the noise of resistance. Though the path was fraught with tension and misunderstanding, I stood firm, ready to meet each challenge with the same unwavering heart that had carried me from dismissal to indispensability. This was my moment to rise fully into the power I had earned, no matter the cost, no matter the opposition, because some truths are too important to be silenced. Amidst the cold winds of resistance and the heavy silence of dismissal, unexpected allies emerged like warm rays of sunlight breaking through thick clouds, reminding me that I was not alone in this fight to reclaim my dignity and place within the family I had long been sidelined from. It was my youngest daughter, the one I had always feared might grow distant or indifferent, who began to show glimpses of a different understanding, small moments of attentiveness when she asked how I was feeling, or took time to listen when I shared my thoughts, as if finally seeing me not as the old and helpless woman, but as a person worthy of respect and care. Her quiet gestures were like sparks igniting hope in the cold room of my heart, and though cautious at first, her growing support became a balm for wounds I thought would never heal. Alongside her came an old friend from the neighborhood, a woman whose sharp eyes and gentle voice cut through the din of judgment and dismissed me as the wise and capable woman she had always known beneath the fading exterior. Her visits brought laughter back into my days, and her words of encouragement reinforced the truth I was discovering about myself, that my strength was real and undeniable. Even a kind-hearted community volunteer who came to check on me during a rough winter became a pillar of support, offering practical help and reminding me that the value I held was not measured by the opinions of those who doubted me. These allies did not wave banners or shout from rooftops. Instead, they stood quietly beside me, their presence a steady current beneath the waves of change I was creating. Their belief in me provided the courage I needed to push forward when doubts crept in, and their validation was a mirror reflecting the woman I had always been beneath the scars of neglect and dismissal. I began to see how powerful it was to have even a few voices speaking truth to the shadows that sought to diminish me, and it encouraged me to trust my own instincts and keep claiming my place. The support of these allies also reminded me that strength is not a solitary endeavor, but a shared journey, one where connection and understanding light the way through the darkest passages. With their help, I navigated the complexities of family dynamics and societal expectations, learning to balance assertion with compassion and courage with patience. Their faith in me became the fuel that sustained my resolve, turning moments of hesitation into steps of confident progress. I realized that even in the face of resistance and backlash, I was gathering a quiet army of advocates, people who saw beyond the surface and recognized the depth of my worth. This unexpected alliance transformed the landscape of my life, filling it with new possibilities and reinforcing the truth that no matter how old or overlooked we may feel, there are always those willing to stand with us, to champion our cause, and to remind us of the strength that lies within. Together, we moved forward, breaking down barriers not with force, but with the steady power of shared belief and unwavering support. The moment of the big reveal arrived, not with thunderous fanfare, but with a quiet, unyielding determination that settled over me like a cloak I had been weaving in secret, each thread a story, a victory, a truth long withheld. It was during a family gathering that had started with the usual undercurrents of tension and dismissive glances, a meeting where I was expected to be seen but not heard, where my role was to nod politely and accept decisions made without my input. But this time, as conversations drifted into familiar patterns of disregard, I found my voice steady and clear, no longer willing to be the background noise in the story of my own life. I spoke of the countless responsibilities I had quietly carried, the bills managed with care, the crises averted with calm precision, the household held together by hands they thought too frail to grasp the reins. I told them how I had been the unseen architect of their comfort, the steady hand guiding the family through storms they refused to acknowledge, and how their dismissive attitudes had overlooked not weakness, but strength. The room grew still, the usual chatter fading into an uncomfortable silence as the weight of my words settled among them, challenging their assumptions and demanding recognition. Eyes that once skimmed past me now held a flicker of surprise, some edged with guilt or shame, others with disbelief that I had been capable of so much beneath their radar. I did not seek to blame or accuse, but to claim what was rightfully mine: the respect, the agency, and the place at the table where decisions were made. My voice, once softened by years of deference, now carried the quiet power of conviction and self-respect. I could see the shifting dynamics in the room, the subtle recalibration of relationships as family members confronted the reality that the woman they had called old and helpless was, in fact, indispensable. There were moments of resistance, whispers of disbelief and murmurs of resentment, but I stood firm, anchored by the knowledge of my own worth and the undeniable proof of my contributions. I laid out my vision for a new chapter where respect was mutual, roles were shared, and the strength of every member was honored, including mine. The tension in the air was palpable, but so was the possibility of transformation. This was more than a confrontation. It was a declaration of self and a call for change. I felt the weight of years lift slightly, replaced by a cautious hope that this revelation would be the turning point. In that room filled with family, some faces softened, others hardened, but all were confronted with a truth they could no longer ignore. I had stepped out of the shadows of invisibility and into the light of recognition, no longer willing to be the quiet support, but demanding to be seen as the pillar I had always been. This moment was the culmination of years of silent endurance and a testament to the power of owning one's story. The family I loved was faced with a new reality, one where the so-called old and helpless was the steady heart and guiding force. And in that truth, I found not only my voice, but the beginning of a new respect that would shape the days to come. The tables began to turn in the quietest and most undeniable way, like the slow shift of seasons that changes the landscape without a single dramatic storm, revealing the true strength beneath the surface as my family started to recognize just how much they depended on me, often without realizing it until the moments when I was not there to smooth the edges of their chaotic lives. I watched with a mixture of quiet satisfaction and cautious restraint as my son fumbled through a pile of unopened bills, his frustration mounting when the due dates loomed and confusion tangled his usually confident demeanor. It was in these small, everyday moments, the forgotten appointments, the overlooked household repairs, the missed deadlines, that the reality of my indispensability became impossible to ignore. My daughter, who once brushed aside my suggestions as outdated or unnecessary, found herself hesitating before decisions, hesitating until she sought my counsel, sometimes reluctantly, sometimes with a hint of relief that came from trusting the steady hand she had so long overlooked. The shift was subtle, but growing stronger with each passing day, a recognition that I was no longer just the background fixture, but the anchor holding everything steady. I took these moments not as opportunities to gloat, but as chances to set clear boundaries and expectations, understanding that the respect I demanded had to be paired with the responsibility they owed me in return. I began to speak openly about what I needed: time, consideration, acknowledgement, and made it clear that the patience I had once extended without question was not endless. The delicate dance of negotiation was challenging, especially with those still clinging to old roles and assumptions, but I approached it with the same calm determination that had guided me through years of invisibility. I reminded them gently but firmly that true respect meant valuing my time and contributions, and not taking for granted the care and effort I poured into our shared lives. Some resisted, balking at the idea of change or fearing the loss of old privileges, but many listened, the hesitation in their eyes giving way to understanding as they saw the wisdom in fairness and balance. This turning of the tables was not just about power, but about reclaiming dignity and forging healthier relationships grounded in mutual respect. I felt a growing sense of empowerment as the family learned to navigate this new dynamic, with me no longer the silent servant, but a recognized partner. The home itself seemed to breathe differently, less burdened by unspoken tensions and more open to cooperation. I found joy in seeing my family grow into this new way of being, even as I remained vigilant against slipping back into old patterns. This transformation was a testament to the quiet power of persistence and the truth that those once dismissed can rise to become the very foundation others rely on. I knew this journey was far from over, but the shift was real, and with it came a renewed hope that respect and love could coexist, built on the clear understanding of each person's worth and role. The so-called helpless woman had become the family's steady heart, and in this role, I found both strength and peace. After years of carrying the weight of dismissal and quiet neglect, the first tentative apologies came like gentle rain after a long drought, unexpected, fragile, and yet filled with the promise of new growth. My son, usually reserved and guarded, approached me one afternoon with a hesitance I had never seen before, his eyes searching mine for forgiveness as he quietly said he was sorry for the times he had ignored my voice and overlooked my efforts. My daughter, too, found moments where her tone softened, and the sharp edges of past impatience gave way to a genuine desire to understand and connect. These small acts of redemption were like fragile threads weaving through the tapestry of our fractured relationships, slowly binding the torn pieces with hope and renewed intention. I responded cautiously, knowing that rebuilding trust was a delicate process, one that required patience, openness, and the willingness to both give and receive grace. We began to share conversations that were no longer rushed or dismissive, but filled with genuine interest and respect, exploring memories and feelings that had long been buried beneath layers of misunderstanding. I saw glimpses of the family I had once dreamed of, a family not defined by roles or assumptions, but by empathy and mutual care. There were moments of warmth that softened the harshness of years past, a shared cup of tea where laughter bubbled up unexpectedly, a hug that lingered longer than usual, or a quiet walk in the garden where words flowed freely and honestly. These were the gentle bridges crossing the chasms of silence and hurt, fragile but strong enough to hold us as we learned to navigate new ways of relating. The journey was far from perfect. Old habits surfaced and required gentle reminders, and sometimes the weight of past wounds cast long shadows over our attempts at connection. Yet with each step forward, the bitterness and resentment that had once seemed insurmountable began to lose their grip. I learned to accept their apologies with a heart open but guarded, knowing that true reconciliation takes time and that trust is earned through consistent kindness and respect. My own heart, once heavy with disappointment and loneliness, found space to heal and hope again. I discovered that redemption is not about erasing the past, but about acknowledging it honestly and choosing to move forward with compassion and courage. These moments of reconnection breathed new life into my days, reminding me that even fractured families can find their way back to each other through the simple acts of listening, forgiving, and loving anew. I began to see myself not as the forgotten elder, but as a cherished member of a family, learning to honor each other's worth. The warmth that blossomed from these reconciliations was a balm to the soul, a quiet celebration of resilience and renewal. And while the scars of the past remained, they no longer defined us. Instead, they became part of a shared story that strengthened our bonds and deepened our understanding. In this healing space, I found not only the redemption of relationships, but the reclaiming of my own sense of belonging and peace, a testament to the enduring power of love to mend even the most fragile ties. I finally stood fully embraced in the role I had quietly claimed over these long years, no longer the overlooked figure lurking in the shadows, but the steady anchor that my family leaned on in ways both big and small, a pillar of strength whose presence was now met with respect rather than dismissal. It was during the family gathering I organized that the full circle of this transformation came into sharp focus, a celebration of unity and new beginnings that I had carefully planned, not just as an event, but as a symbol of the journey we had traveled together. The house buzzed with warmth and laughter, a tapestry of familiar faces weaving together stories old and new, the air alive with a sense of connection that once seemed impossible. As I moved through the room, greeting each family member with genuine smiles and heartfelt words, I felt a deep sense of belonging wash over me, a sensation so powerful it made the years of struggle and invisibility fade into a distant memory. My children, once hesitant and unsure, now sought my guidance openly, their eyes filled with a newfound appreciation that went beyond duty and obligation. Even the youngest cousins, who had barely known the woman before her quiet rise, looked up to me with a mixture of admiration and curiosity, sensing the strength that radiated quietly but unmistakably. The traditions I revived during the event, the passing down of recipes, the sharing of stories from ancestors long gone, the lighting of candles to honor those who paved the way, felt like threads stitching us closer together, weaving a fabric of respect and love that had been frayed by years of misunderstanding. In orchestrating this gathering, I was not just celebrating the past, but planting seeds for the future, demonstrating that family is a living, evolving force that can heal and grow when nurtured with patience and courage. The confidence that now shone in my eyes was not born of arrogance, but of hard-earned self-worth, a glow that illuminated even the darkest corners of doubt that had once clung to me. I saw how the dynamics around me had shifted, the subtle deference in conversations, the way my opinions carried weight, and the quiet but unmistakable reliance placed on me to guide decisions. It was a full circle moment, a testament to the truth that respect is not given lightly, but earned through perseverance, love, and unwavering dedication. I felt pride not only in my role, but in the family we had become, imperfect but resilient, bound by the shared recognition of each other's value. This evening was more than a gathering. It was a celebration of transformation, a beacon of hope for those who, like me, had once felt invisible and dismissed. I realized that the strength I had cultivated was not just for my own survival, but to illuminate a path for others who might one day stand where I now stood, confident, seen, and deeply loved. The journey to this moment had been long and fraught with challenge, but as I watched the smiles and heard the laughter filling the room, I knew every step had been worth it. In this full circle embrace, I found not only my place in the family, but a peace and joy that came from being truly acknowledged and cherished. Life settled into a new rhythm that felt both unfamiliar and deeply comforting, like the gentle unfolding of a long-awaited dawn after years spent in twilight. And I found myself firmly rooted in a place I had long dreamed of, a space where respect was no longer conditional, and where my presence was valued not as a courtesy, but as an essential part of the family's fabric. The mornings began with a quiet assurance, knowing that my voice would be heard and my efforts recognized, not just in passing, but with genuine gratitude that softened the edges of past neglect. I became the trusted advisor on matters large and small, from managing household finances to navigating the complexities of schedules and commitments, and each day brought new moments of affirmation that I was no longer the invisible figure I had once been. The transformation in dynamics was subtle yet profound. Conversations flowed with a warmth that replaced previous tensions, and the habitual dismissals that had once echoed through our interactions gave way to thoughtful consideration and open dialogue. I noticed the change not only in the words spoken, but in the silences that followed, spaces filled with understanding rather than indifference. There was a peace in this new normal, a quiet satisfaction in knowing that I had reclaimed my place with dignity and grace, that the years of patience and perseverance had culminated in a life where I could finally breathe freely without the weight of invisibility pressing down on me. The family home, once a place of silent struggle and unspoken resentments, now hummed with cooperation and mutual respect, a sanctuary where each member's contributions were celebrated and the strengths of all were woven together into a resilient whole. I found joy in the everyday rituals that had once felt like obligations, but now shimmered with meaning. The shared meals where laughter flowed easily, the evenings spent in conversation where my stories and insights were welcomed, the simple acts of kindness that reflected a deeper connection and appreciation. This new rhythm did not erase the past, nor the challenges that had brought us here, but it created a foundation from which we could move forward with hope and renewed bonds. I felt a profound sense of fulfillment as I looked around at the faces of those I loved, seeing in their eyes the reflection of the woman I had become, strong, valued, and deeply loved. The peace that settled over my heart was not born of perfection, but of authenticity, the gift of being truly seen and accepted for all that I am. In this place, I found freedom from the shadows of doubt and dismissal, and the courage to continue growing and embracing life with an open heart. The new normal was a quiet celebration of resilience and renewal, a living testament to the power of respect and the enduring strength of family. I carried this peace with me every day, a steady flame guiding me through the evolving chapters ahead. As I sit here reflecting on the long journey that has brought me to this moment, I feel compelled to share a message that I hope will reach anyone who, like me, has ever been underestimated, dismissed, or made to feel invisible because of their age or circumstances. Age is often seen as a limitation, a marker of decline, but I have come to understand that it can also be a wellspring of strength, a testament to endurance and quiet resilience that only time can forge. The years have carved lines into my face, yes, but they have also etched stories of survival, courage, and unyielding spirit that cannot be measured by youthful energy alone. I want those who feel overlooked to know that beneath the surface, beyond the assumptions and stereotypes, lies a reservoir of power waiting to be recognized and embraced. True strength does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers in the steady hands that keep a family together, in the patient voice that speaks truth softly but firmly, in the determined heart that refuses to be silenced. It is a strength born not from loud declarations, but from the countless small acts of endurance and love that build up over a lifetime. To those who feel dismissed because they no longer fit society's narrow ideals of usefulness or vitality, I say this: your worth is not diminished by age or circumstance, but is illuminated by the wisdom and grace you have gathered. You are not past your prime. You are in the richest season of your life, with a depth of experience that is irreplaceable and a clarity that can guide others through their own storms. The path may be difficult, and the world may not always acknowledge your value, but hold fast to the knowledge that your presence matters. I have learned that resilience is not about never falling, but about rising each time with renewed determination, about holding on to hope when the nights feel darkest. It is about believing in oneself even when others doubt or overlook you. My own journey from being labelled old and helpless to becoming the pillar my family depends on has been marked by moments of doubt and struggle, but also by triumph and growth. If I can find this strength, so can you. The power to redefine your place in the world lies within your hands, waiting to be claimed. Embrace your story, honor your journey, and do not be afraid to assert your worth. The quiet resilience that lives within you is a force to be reckoned with, one that can change lives and shift the very fabric of the relationships around you. Remember, being seen and valued is not just a gift you receive, but a truth you can embody through your actions and self-respect. Age does not make you less. It makes you more seasoned, more compassionate, more formidable in ways the world often fails to appreciate. So to everyone who has felt cast aside or underestimated, know that you are powerful beyond measure, and that your voice, your strength, and your presence are needed now more than ever. Stand tall in your truth, and let your light shine unapologetically. Your story is far from over, and the best chapters are yet to be written.